Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We are going to systematically deconstruct the mythology of the Hindu god Shiva to uncover a grounded terrestrial history. We all know the iconic images, right? The cosmic dancer, the blue-throated savior, the supreme destroyer. But today, we're setting aside the theology to look purely at the historical, archaeological, and sociological evidence. So what if the cosmic destroyer was actually just a man? Let's dive right into this. We're going to peel back thousands of years of myth to reveal that the origins of this supreme deity actually lie with marginalized mortal monks. What emerges from the historical record isn't a supernatural god descending from the heavens, but rather this incredible composite memory of real human ascetics, shamans, and yogis who are pushing the absolute limits of the human mind and body. To solve this historical mystery, here's our roadmap. We'll start with deconstructing a cosmic deity, then look at the Bronze Age yogi, move on to shamans, outcasts, and assimilation, discuss institutionalizing the ascetic ideal, investigate Lakulisha, the historical Shiva, and finally end with the apotheosis of human will. Okay, part 1, deconstructing a cosmic deity, peeling back the layers of Puranic mythology. Part 2, the Bronze Age yogi, and the 4,000-year-old archaeological clue. We begin by acknowledging Shiva today as the omnipotent Lord of the universe, before looking past the theological narratives to find the very human drive for bodily mastery. Our first physical clue into this extreme human endurance takes us all the way back to the ruins of the Indus Valley around 2500 BC. There, we find the highly contested Pashupati seal. It depicts a figure in Muna Bandhasana, or the root lock pose. Now, this is a highly complex cross-legged yogic posture, where the soles of the feet are touching and the heels are pressed closely to the groin. You don't just accidentally sit like this. It requires immense joint flexibility and prolonged practice. What's absolutely fascinating here is that the deliberate rendering of this posture proves that intense physical austerities predated formalized religion by millennia. Over 4,000 years ago, an ascetic tradition already existed and commanded enough respect to be immortalized on civilizational seals. Now, we do have to impartially examine the fierce academic debate around this seal. Back in 1931, Sir John Marshall looked at the animals and the posture and labeled it a proto-Shiva, noting it was tricephalic, or three-headed, and ichthyophallic. Meanwhile, Audrey Trushke points out that the lack of a deciphered script negates a direct Hindu continuity, and she leans toward Eurasian Lord of Animals motifs. Then you have Divdit Patnaik, who suggests it's likely an early tribal shaman or proto-tantric figure whose local significance got absorbed over time. But regardless of what we call the figure, the undeniable takeaway is the physical reality it definitively portrays: a highly sophisticated, ancient, disciplined human ascetic. Moving on to part 3, shamans, outcasts, and assimilation, following the textual breadcrumbs. So as we move into the Vedic period, we leave the cities behind and enter the untamed wilderness. Migrating pastoralist tribes brought their own gods like Indra and Agni, but on the fringes of their society, something entirely different was happening. There's this really eerie verse from the Rig Veda's Keshan Sukta describing a wandering, long-haired sage who drank poison with the cup together with Rudra. This describes a solitary human shaman. That poison likely represents either extreme physical hardships or hallucinogenic substances used to achieve altered states of consciousness. Later mythology literally interprets this as Shiva swallowing world-destroying cosmic poison to save the universe. But historically, this was a mortal man enduring extreme survival conditions, or ingesting toxic flora to induce visionary trances, communing with the wild storm god Rudra. This brings us to the Vratya phenomenon. These were nomadic, non-conformist ascetics roaming completely outside orthodox Brahmanism. Ordinary people were actually terrified of them because of their perceived magical and medicinal powers. So what did the mainstream religious establishment do? Well, to prevent a religious schism, they didn't destroy them. They deliberately assimilated them. They took the supreme archetype of these wanderers, known as the Eka Vratya, and declared him a great god, or Mahadeva. They essentially brought the powerful, terrifying wild man of the forest right into the Orthodox temple, merging their human leader with the storm god, Rudra. Which leads us to part 4, institutionalizing the ascetic ideal, the philosophical synthesis of the human yogi. By roughly 400 to 200 BCE, texts like the Shvatashvatara Upanishad came along and provided a cohesive philosophical framework to justify this newly merged, formerly marginal figure. This marks the transition of Shiva from an external roaming ascetic to an internal state of being. And the beauty of this is that it became a state achievable by any dedicated human practitioner through disciplined effort. The authors weren't just theorizing, they recorded exact physiological signs of meditation, like controlled breath and clear complexion. So the crucial point is that this text successfully domesticated that frightening outcast, packaging extreme practices into a structured, achievable path of yoga. Part 5. Lakulisha, the historical Shiva. This is the smoking gun of our investigation. As we enter the Common Era, those generalized archetypes vanish, and we finally uncover a concrete, historically verifiable human being from Gujarat named Lakulisha. You can see how this ascetic archetype builds across an immense stretch of time. We start with the Pashupati seal in 2500 BCE, move to the early Vedic period with the Kashan around 1500 BCE, hit the Upanishadic synthesis at 400 BCE, and then, in the 1st century CE, we have the life of Lakulisha. And this is firmly anchored into historical fact by the Mathura pillar inscription from 380 CE. That inscription records an ascetic naming his teachers generation by generation, all the way back to a direct disciple of Lakulisha. It mathematically proves that he was a real man living in the 1st or 2nd century, not just a myth. This sets up a really fascinating comparison between myth and historical reality. The myth shows Shiva as a terrifying madman roaming cremation grounds, smeared in ashes, completely naked, and disregarding social etiquette. It sounds like pure fantasy. But the historical reality is that Pachupata monks were intentionally acting insane in public to invite abuse, achieve ego death, and detach from societal norms. It brilliantly illustrates that the wild Puranic myths about Shiva are actually highly accurate reflections of the calculated, day-to-day practices of these real human monks. Lakulisha engineered this bizarre, radical psychology as a systematic formula to destroy human pride and the illusion of the self. Think about the mental resilience required here. Step 1. Endure extreme physical austerities in lone caves or active cremation grounds. Step 2. Intentionally act insane, walking like cripples, speaking nonsense just to invite public ridicule without showing a single ounce of anger. And step 3, transfer your bad karma to the abusers and achieve total psychological detachment. By accepting the abuse without anger, they believed they were trading their bad karma for the abuser's good karma. It's an absolutely incredible display of human willpower. Early iconography depicted Lakulisha as a mortal, two-armed yogi displaying Urdhva. This is the supreme yogic mastery over sensual desires, where energy is channeled upward through the nervous system rather than being expended, which was symbolized in early art by an ichthyphallic depiction. Often shown holding a simple wooden club, his physical portrayal was meant to show absolute control over human biological impulses. Over the centuries, his followers elevated this mortal teacher so much that he was entirely absorbed into the cosmic mythology of Shiva, eventually becoming deified as his 28th avatar. And finally, Part 6, the apotheosis of human will, looking at the geographical anchor of the ascetic ideal. To truly understand this story, we have to look at the severe physical environment that tested these ancient ascetics, Mount Kailash. This mountain isn't just some fantasy realm. It represents the very real historical migration of human yogis to the most hostile environment on Earth to conquer their physical limitations. And it's a cross-cultural axis mundi. In Jainism, it's where the first Tirthankara attained nirvana. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's the legendary meditation site of the Yogi Milarepa. For the Bon religion, it's the spiritual center of the universe. And in Shaivism, it was the absolute, freezing retreat for severe physical austerities. The high Himalayas served as a universal testing ground for human willpower. So the deity we know today is actually the composite, idealized memory of every historical monk, shaman, and yogi who ever walked away from the comforts of society and looked inward. Stripping away the mythological layers doesn't diminish the god at all. Instead, it uncovers a breathtaking monument to the sheer willpower of the human spirit. In this historical tradition, the ultimate reverence isn't given to a distant, untouchable creator in the sky. It's given to the mortal human who manages to entirely conquer their own mind and body. Shiva is the culmination of every real-world ascetic who ever sat naked in the snow and simply refused to break. Which brings us to a final question. If mortal ascetics seeking ego death could inspire the universe's most powerful deity, what limits have we falsely placed on our own human potential? I'll leave you with that provocative thought to ponder as we conclude our explainer on the awe-inspiring human history hidden within our most ancient myths. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey, from the Bronze Age all the way to the peaks of the Himalayas. Keep questioning the layers of history, and I'll see you in the next one.